Charles Samuel Penn, translated Vision or Legend of Mumu, Chapter 2, Part 1, Unanswered Questions. I would highly recommend reading or listening to Chapter 1 before Chapter 2. Who knows what you'll take from this out of context. When I initially wrote down the events of my fragmented dream, I just wrote what I saw and didn't really think about a possible future after those events. I spent a lot of time talking about how film and music videos could have shaped the dream, even dug into my own psyche trying to figure out if it was something related to my past. I even spent a good portion of the ending of Part 1 saying, hey, maybe this is some kind of hippie message about not destroying our planet. But as the years go by and people do trample hundreds at some mountaintop religious ceremony, certain parts of my dream have been oddly prophetic. Also, over the years, I have questioned the Mumu creature's motivation, how it's able to physically sort humanity within a blink of an eye, spotting aggressive behavior or somehow knowing who isn't worthy of its new world. This feels like a possible allegory for immigration, but let's just keep this sci-fi. In the last story, I mentioned that the Mumu creature, not the boy named Mumu, just to make things ultra confusing. I mentioned that it was potentially some sort of sentient black hole, able to consume indefinitely without any change in mass. I also alluded that there could be millions of these creatures through this portal to another world, and that there may be more than one type. But I hate to say this, I don't have anything to report on that front. It would just be more conjecture leading into made-up bullshit, which this all is, but it may have insightful ties to our real life here and there, and thus I feel obligated to make this additional report. I'm going to pretend like that thing in the future will happen, and I'm going to tell you what I think happens after that. And since it was my dream, I feel that not only should I be the one to report it, but understand that in the first chapter dream, I was there, but I was non-corporeal. I was out of my body, witnessing creatures swallow humans whole and kids shooting each other on an alien beach. Yeah, freaking crazy, but that's my point. I'm the only one who can tell you. No co-writers. At first I thought that only kids were able to go through this portal just because from what I'd seen, that's all that had tried. But by the end, everyone was going in. I just didn't see what happened to adults till the very climax. Poor Derek. And I still don't know if I can explain this, but adults did go in. But certain individuals with a taste for or vested interest in soylent grains, I guess, said they weren't leaving their homes and businesses without a little more research, and I imagine that's exactly what happened after the initial trampling. But as a skeptic, I'm going to pretend that there were a few more skeptics. True, they're cannibals maybe. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not in a future without a sun. How long do rations last? So it's easy for me to see a bunch of hungry morons charging headfirst into a portal, maybe tens of thousands, just in search of a better life. So let's pretend General Schwartz has put a temporary ban on portal use and started researching. He throws some people into hazmat suits mounted with high-tech future-y cameras. They get into the massive tub and they spin, spin, spin. Whoosh, portal opens and here we go. What do they find? I mentioned in the first chapter that Nick was waving his gun around, unable to handle the toxicity of his environment. I remember almost cutting that word, toxicity, but in fact it definitely has relevance as the hazmat team plummets off the waterfall into Mumu Land. They find nothing. Not a flipping thing. What did you think they'd see? A bunch of humans laying on the beach being sustained by a god in the form of a young boy's mother that I couldn't actually see? No, that's stupid. That's why it's a fictionalized take on a dream. So, if it isn't that thing I thought our young Mumu saw, it's an illusion. And perhaps the Mumu creatures weren't as benevolent as I first thought. The team wanders around joking about taking their helmets off, and of course the team leader doesn't allow it. So moving on, they walk, record, and collect various plant species. They take soil, water, oxygen samples, the works. I'm assuming very pro. Maybe the first team was stupid and took off their helmets, but I'm not trying to prolong the action. I'm trying to get to the bottom of things. Sorry, wait for the movie. Yeah, they walk for miles, finding not a soul, but don't worry, I've got you. I freaked you out before, I'm going to freak you out again. At first I thought it was my innocence that allowed me to see a heaven-like world where children played without fear or need of sustenance, but then I saw adults could go too. They just got all their energy sucked out and left as a husk on the beach. However, this hazmat team survived, and it's because they were breathing oxygen, not whatever that alien world has to offer. They aren't compelled to go back except to research after enjoying a can of Soylent grains, maybe. I don't know. Schwartz isn't very happy with the report, and they started going over the footage, which recorded in all kinds of spectrums. And yeah, the hazmat team didn't breathe the air, so they didn't get turned. But there are shapes, life forms, and structures moving around in the infrared, and I hate to burst your bubble, but the shapes do not look like kids. This leads the researchers and Schwartz to believe that the aliens or the Mumu are keeping the kids until they're adults in order to attach them to the net of possibly millions, yes, millions, laying on the beach all connected with all their energy sucked out. Schwartz can't tell it, but those first few red blurs on the beach could be his old friend Bert, Mumu, and an old-aged Vivi, Nick, and Derek. Not what you were expecting, eh? I always thought it was a possibility that voices and visions were a lure, and while I couldn't see what Mumu was seeing, I was able to feel it, which I explained. It felt nice, compelling me to want to lay on the beach and be sustained forever. Schwartz is again not satisfied, and now his thoughts are like my own. Was the Mumu creature from that alien world, or is it the creature from Filipino folklore? It just actually exists. What are those inhuman blobs in the infrared? Are they the same creatures? Are they Earth's children? How do a bunch of human husks on vast, endless beaches serve the takeover or transfer of a race? Is this a war or forced migration? Initially, I had a partially sorted and translated dream, and now I've had an epiphany and vision of the aftermath that I will attempt to explain. Unfortunately, at the moment, I have no joy to give you. There are other factors that I'm assuming are in play here, by the fact that analysts are now saying millions are trapped, not hundreds of thousands, which means this has been going on a long time, and it's at this point I imagine we'll find multiple portals have been at play here, and some of those other factors, or factions if you will, may have found a way to make the portals. But let's not get ahead or even talk about something that could really just be irrelevant filler. You know, that's movie or part 3 shit. Oh, and if this explanation story based on a dream is shorter, it's because it's a bummer. I don't foresee it being longer than the first chapter since I already know the bummer ending, and getting from point L to point Z just won't be as difficult to explain as point A through K. I wasn't trying to do sci-fi horror after psychological sci-fi horror, but there is still that psychic sorting going on, and while at this second in time I want to stop writing and just think about where and how the Mumu shits at its victims, that too spoils the drama and the payoff. Shit! I'm sorry, but I saw it. I know it was just a dream, but in this dream future, this thing judged and consumed whole people. It's happening right now even. There's another hazmat team in there, and they've brought along and constructed tiny jetpacks and vehicles to traverse more distances. Also, Schwartz has the water automatically machine spun since this trip is fairly exerting on top of the extra exertion from spinning. People were reporting, even myself in the last story, you could drown easy. So yeah, the first thing we're doing is getting close to one of those red blobs to see if we can touch it or scan it. Whatever, isn't that what you, the reader/listener, would do? Unfortunately, not only is it just showing up as a blur, but as our team gets closer to the possible child-sized blur, a larger blur starts crawling up and we all know what it is. This time we have cameras rolling as teeth and eyes slowly pour out of its camouflage to see the 3 researchers. And it does this up close. A female researcher falls over backwards as the Mumu creature inspects her. We'll say her name is Laura, whatever. And the 2 behind her are Guy 1 and Guy 2. The Mumu doesn't perceive Laura as a threat and then looks to Guy 1 and Guy 2. The Mumu seems to leap out of existence, but so does Guy 1. In fact, upon noticing Guy 1's immediate disappearance from his side, Guy 2 pretty much jumps in startled astonishment, loses his footing, and falls only to have his helmet break and his energy get sucked out. Laura catches all this on camera and brings it back to us, alone. Shitty. But that was cool of the Mumu not to eat her. I guess slamming 20 brewskis and getting a train run on you every night through college doesn't equate to evil. Not really seeing the motivation here, Mumu. Help me out. Drug dealers and murderers, and according to Filipino folklore, bad kids that didn't do their chores and homework. I guess Guy 2 wasn't on the Mumu's radar. He was just a clumsy doofus. A clumsy dead doofus. You know what? Can we send some motherfluffin' soldiers into this thing? That's what I'm talking about, Schwartz. China and North Korea want to nuke the portal. So let's see some chutzpah, Schwartz. Sorry, this isn't a dream this time. I'm more or less saying that if what I saw wasn't what I saw, then what other explanation could there be? Damn it, I wish there was a way to tell Schwartz that the Mumu creature is immune to bullets. Don't get me wrong, I figured it out. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But I don't want to spoil all the drama, and while I'm not saying a tiny tactical nuclear device wouldn't disrupt a sentient black hole, I mean, who the hell am I to report whether something like that would work or not? And guess what? That doesn't come up either. And I, the writer, not this black hole brain narrator, am like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. You'll understand why by the end when even you, the listener, may be saying, you gotta be freaking kidding me. Either for the whack bummer explanation or for not putting in extra shoehorned explosions. I'll try. It doesn't take long to send in the troops and set up temporary oxygenated outposts. Drones are assembled and map the entire planet. This takes several hours, and yes, we do confirm this is definitely another planet, not Earth. Schwartz comes too, along with Laura and her remaining research companions, one who has slight autism and Tourette's syndrome, but still a competent researcher named Sean. Yeah, that's it, Sean. And he immediately starts hearing voices. People and memories from his past randomly popping into his mind, so real that if he closed his eyes, he'd practically see it. He knows there's absolutely no reason for those memories to surface and is just confused as balls as to why. Despite his controlled conditions, I, on the other hand, know his brain is being accessed like Mumu when talking to his mother god in the previous chapter. And Sean, due to his, albeit controlled and medicated disability, like Mumu, is technically more open to these types of mental intrusions. Remember, I didn't know much about Mumu and Viv, only that Viv was younger and treated Mumu like he was the younger brother even though he was older. Oh, and the hallucinations, that gave Vivi a clue too. That's pretty cuckoo. I'm trying not to be offensive here, but give me a break. Sean immediately tells Laura, Laura tells Schwartz, and within minutes, entire teams are sorted and units are pulled, returned, replaced, but Sean insists on staying and Schwartz and Laura don't say no. That's nice, and handy for me the writer, because much like I didn't know Viv and Mumu, I have no idea what's in Sean and Laura's pockets and book bags. I know something about brewskis and trains, autism and Tourette's. Point is, Sean's convenient, and I imagine Schwartz thinks so too at this point. In fact, let's try and wrap this up and try not to introduce any more characters. Just use Guy 1 and Guy O. Oh, so I didn't lie, delay, or mislead. I'm reporting as things happen, and there are two structures the drones have mapped on this planet. One massive and the other directly adjacent, which is minuscule by comparison. It would take hours to get there by jetpack with multiple stops for cooling. Trike would be smarter, and Schwartz has brought it all. At first I said there was nothing there, and so I have to wait for our characters to find said structures to reveal them. I'm trying not to hold your hand, and it would have been pointless filler to mention before now. Booyah. Laura and Schwartz are standing next to a table with Sean when Schwartz turns to Sean and says, "Alright, Sean, wait, where's Sean?" Even I was kinda not really paying attention to that character I just introduced, but seriously, as quickly as he was introduced, he is now nowhere to be found. Even Laura kinda looks befuddled and shrugs. He doesn't respond through communications, but each suit has location ability, so Schwartz brings up an aerial map showing all of his units' current locations, and it would seem as though Sean has started off through the woods alone, and he's going fast. Schwartz commands Guy 3 and Guy 4 to follow, but I'm here, and I'm impatient, so I'll just tell you, he's being chased. Nobody saw the Mumu come into the camp but Sean, and he apparently panicked off into the woods. He is being chased, though. It's not his imagination, and just as you think the Mumu is going to swallow Sean whole, instead, it pushes him out of phase. This not only makes Sean look like a red blur on infrared, but it also means he is now surrounded by all those red blurs in this pocket dimension. However, they are no longer blurs to Sean, being in the same state. They are children, and they seem to be sleeping. Actually, it's kind of weird. Some of these kids are full grown, but seem to be incubating in this pocket dimension. Adults on the beach, kids in a pocket dimension going through forced rapid maturation. Quite the opposite of what I saw in my dream, but I've accepted that that was a dream, and these kids must have only seemed happy, their physical forms no longer matching that of a truly healthy human. Sean looks confused, but tries to remain brave. I know I'd be freaking the hell out. I apologize for the way the story is unfolding, but stick with me here, guys. I don't have a dream this time providing me with imagery, jolting me from location to location, so I have to guess or assume this team has the tech to assess their situation and overcome obstacles. I don't want to say Palm Pilots or tricorders, when even current cell phone tablet tech is already the equivalent or better. So I imagine future tech will be more than adequate, with Schwartz and Laura seeing few tech obstacles. This helps me move things along without having to explain or imagine future names, model numbers for drones, location devices, scanners, etc., etc. No one gives a shit if it's an X2 or X2222 drone. Let's just stay focused. Sean's signal was lost as soon as he was pushed into incubation. Schwartz has already decided that incubation is to rush the kids to adulthood, and Sean only assumes that the creature shoved him in here for his brain to repair, or maybe like young Mumu before, Sean could be useful to the creature, and thus he finds himself in a pocket dimension with a bunch of creepy, deformed kids. His brain is repairing here though, and that's pretty cool, but our crew still doesn't know the end game. So while it may seem marvelous now, I fear things are far from nice. At first, it would seem that there's not much for Sean to do here. He's stuck and his team can't find his locator. They're assuming the worst. He pulls out his scanner and proceeds to see if he can save a few of these kids. They're hovering and encased within several tubes, taking care of nutrients and waste. This will not be easy, and Sean will likely be referring to medical information stored on his device. He's no surgeon, but at the moment, with things looking dire, he decides to go ahead. There are endless rows of hovering children rapidly maturing as far as the eye can see. The infrared movement we saw was the natural wake of the pocket dimension, seemingly still and quiet inside, but outside you can see hovering movement and rotation. The only reason I can think of for my mistake is that I was seeing what these kids are seeing, and in their suspended state, they must think they're free and playing, building, etc. Maybe I did see containers with mutant kids in my dream, but I didn't remember or know how to process it. It is the answer. Despite momentary confusion, I do know the end game and whoever, whatever needs to maturate these children and keep the adults too, so it's safe to assume that this isn't heaven, and to reiterate what I saw when following these kids to this alien planet was them building houses and having fake wars in tree forts like the movie Hook. But that's just what they're seeing and living in their current stasis, and it's the only thing to explain my discrepancy in the first report. When it comes to the adults, well, there's a reason I had no illusions when it came to them. Just hang on a few more minutes. I've tried to avoid talking about myself and my past, and psyche, blah blah blah, but since I am so childish and do border on OCD, bipolar, autism, Tourette's, it may explain why I am a witness, and I may be here right now, in stasis, thinking that I'm writing and reciting this story. I know, that's crazy talk, but it would explain why there were no alternate ideas thrown at me between chapters. In the first chap, I mentioned that you may have a different interpretation of what the visuals or outcome meant. On current social media platforms, I shared some of my alternate theories about what could be what, or mean this and that, but after realizing why all these people are lined up on a beach, as you may have concluded in the last chapter, there can only be a couple of non-mystical explanations. If I am in a simulation, it means no one can provide alternate viewpoints after this one either, and there will be no point in a third chapter. I could be shadow banned, which just creates the feeling of an empty matrix. This is my second report, and in my first report I threw everything at you, including the unbelievable, but now the report has debunked some, and even progressed the story further with the removal of such preposterous avenues. You mystics and faith-reliant may see magic and miracles where others see science, but that doesn't mean your interpretation is completely wrong, invalid, or uninteresting. Hell yeah, banter over a poker game? Cool. Going to war over and forcing someone to believe? Not so hot. In fact, thanks to those ridiculous beliefs, science now has an explanation to match a lot of your historic visuals. We'll get you a new paint-by-numbers Bible someday, but for now, you're stuck with what you got, and we'll just have to have science make you sound like a lunatic here and there if you keep repeating it and ignoring news updates. Anyways, back to the show. So yeah, Sean starts freeing kids from their stasis chambers, as many as he can, and lines them up gently next to each other, frantically. Hastily, he responds to his medical reference database's commands, and it seems to be working. Part 2. Questions answered. It's hard not to prematurely reveal details. That's what after-chapter chatter is for. Conjecture at the bar or on the couch with a chickie. For instance, I totally want to add another faction into this conflict, and at the end I'll mention that as the details of this incident come out, world powers and big businessmen will all have a vested interest in this portal, if not already. Again, I'll try and wrap that up at the end, but if you want to consider it as a looming force when rechecking this document, by all means. But none of those characters were present during the preceding events. While I have been jocular and hasty in my report, there are certain things that I'll not only have trouble reporting due to the horrific events that took place, but in fact I wasn't there for a big part of it, and can only retell and recite dialogue from open communications between General Schwartz and Laura, last name unknown. Thanks to these final logs, we can see that General Schwartz began moving and setting up Site B nearer to the recently revealed structures, and placed multiple nuclear ordnance orders for demolishing the site and closing the portal on both ends, which, as you all have been made aware, was done successfully. Though he has passed, General Schwartz and his team went above and beyond the call of duty, and I would request that any reprimands be left out or removed from his and his team's permanent records. While the events I'm about to reveal have been declassified, it's still nationally sensitive and not for everyone's ears. Anyone with weak hearts or stomachs, please be advised. Laura took a trike and told Schwartz she was making a beeline for the structures. Schwartz gave the go-ahead and followed behind shortly after with tiny tac nukes, and of course Guy 3 and Guy 4 accompanying. Laura can't see the seemingly endless line of people lying shielded and cloaked on the beach, but she knows they're there. While she is driving fast, she is being careful because a wreck could compromise her suit. Thankfully, the sand is nice and uniform, so zipping to her destination is practically a breeze. Turns out it's not an endless line of comatose humans lying on this beach, but it is miles and miles beyond sight. As she approaches the structures, she sees that it's only one tiny structure and a massive landing pad to facilitate larger B and C-type cargo vessels. She assumes the tiny structure is the control center and heads for that, ignoring the landing pad. She reports her findings to Schwartz and proceeds to walk inside. All communication lines are open. The tiny structure only has one console, and all of its functions are foreign to her, so she pulls out her digital assistant and activates the hologram loop. A holographic assistant then appears, and Laura asks her to help her analyze and decipher glyphs and functions. This takes several minutes, and Schwartz is still running behind. After minutes of tinkering, Laura and her assistant have located the power functions, but the system advises against shutdown. Laura's assistant reports 2 holographic data files, but has to use a bit of her own matrix and translation patches in order to bring up the assistant. The other file is simply marked Other, and Laura activates it. The Mumu creature then activates directly in front of her. This startles Laura, but her assistant calms her and says, "It's not real." Right. Laura then moves in close, looking at the ball of eyes, teeth, and fur. "This thing's been a hologram the whole time?" The assistant responds, "It's possible this is just a representation of the creature, but its details are incredible. Frightening to look at. Deactivate it." "Yes, ma'am." The assistant then deactivates the Mumu and proceeds to activate the assistant. "It is humanoid. You can ask it anything now. I've given it my own translation matrix." "Thank you." "Hey, who are you?" "Me? Are you joking? You just opened me." "I mean, where did you come from?" "You just activated me." Laura's digital assistant interrupts. "How do we deactivate the power and salvage the cargo?" "You can't. Once someone has been drained and entered into the preservation process, you can't undo it," Laura interrupts. "What about the kids?" Laura's digital assistant asks the computer, "Can the maturation be disrupted?" "Yes, but it would take days, and you would need oxygenated facilities." Laura now speaks up. "What is the point? Why maturate the children?" The computer responds, "They are no longer children. The maturation process also ensures the ultimate level of quality meat." Schwartz has been listening in, and you can hear him on the communicator. "My God." The computer continues. "This is a hub world. In human terms, a sort of slaughterhouse between buyer and farmer." Laura composes herself, stops the computer, and says, "When is the next shipment?" The computer responds, "Momentarily. We never expected you to give yourselves voluntarily, so we've upped our shipment schedule. If I were you, I wouldn't be here when they come." General Schwartz speaks up. "Who are they?" The computer's holographic image rolls its eyes and says, "How the hell should I know? I may be a program, but I'm not stupid. If you don't want to be food, you'll leave now." Laura puts her hands up. "I have more questions." The hologram looks exasperated. "Ugh, what? Why did you take my partner and not me?" "Everyone's time is different. The Mumu can access human memory, and thus bad or damaged grapes get moved to the front of the line." Schwartz comes in over the comm. "Can't have cattle killing cattle." The computer nods in the affirmative. "Precisely." Laura looks bewildered. "Mumu?" The computer smirks. "Wow, you really don't know anything. The creature comes from your world. We killed it, replicated it, and augmented its ability." "Why children?" Laura asks. "The Mumu would only take supposed wicked before, but after our programming, he could take hundreds, even thousands a night, transporting its victims directly to processing. Fairly indiscriminate, actually, so we had to maturate the children." Schwartz again. "And I'm assuming the children are placed in the pile once the maturation is complete." "Laura, this sounds like a rival colony, or perhaps even one of our own powerful citizens in cahoots." "Bravo!" You have a very smart man coming out of that radio. But I fear this is the end of our Q&A. Do you hear it? Do you feel its rumble? The digital assistant speaks up. A massive ship is approaching, C-class. The ship tears through the clouds and starts near the end of the beach at a slow pace and begins teleporting up bodies. The computer speaks again. I have informed them of your interference. Earth has approximately 900 years before it eats itself. Hurry home. Enjoy the time you have left. At this moment, General Schwartz, Guy 3, and Guy 4 wait for the massive ship to pass beside them, and the three of them unleash mini tactical nukes, all three of which hit the target and bring the massive cargo ship down in a glorious, flame-filled explosion. The computer looks frustrated. You tricked me! The computer then materializes the fake Mumu in between General Schwartz, Guy 3, Guy 4, and activates it. Obviously, Guy 3 and Guy 4 go down in an instant, and as Guy 4 gets gobbled and transported to the pile, General Schwartz fires another tactical nuke, disrupting the Mumu's matrix and destroying it. Unfortunately, he was so close to his target, he also obliterated himself. Okay, so it turns out a nuke definitely decompiles a holographic matrix, but black holes, that's another story, and I have no idea if this Mumu creature is the Mumu creature from the last story. Also, not to be a bummer, but Schwartz kinda dies for nothing since the computer could technically just compile another one. But thankfully, fortunately, it doesn't come up. But unfortunately, either someone outside input commands into the computer or it has a contingency plan. The computer paces back and forth. You tricked me! You tricked me! System compromise! You tricked me! Die! The computer's holographic image disappears and the console immediately gets red hot. The digital assistant says, hold on to your helmet. She then grabs Laura up and darts out of the tiny structure just in time. Unfortunately, the device powering the assistant's matrix was left in the structure, so she decompiles as the structure explodes and Laura holds her helmet as she lands, tumbles, and rolls several meters in the sand. Damn! 3 big-ass explosions, back to back. Now, as much as I'd like to give you a happy ending, we would have needed days for that. And as the control console explodes, so does the power regulation to the maturation field and the cloaked preservation shield covering the beach cargo. Laura looks up just in time to see amorphous bags of flesh plopping to the ground every few meters for miles. Her head starts shaking and tears rocket out of her eyes. No! God! A similar thing is happening to Sean, who actually witnessed the humanoid creatures implode, not having completed the maturation and not having time to convert back to traditional atmosphere. Sean hadn't been in long enough to change or have trouble reverting back. Also, he had his suit, but these children had been incubating for weeks, months, who knows? So not only did he have a first-hand view of these implosions, but he also got to hear the tiny muffled shrieks from all the children imploding in every direction around him. All of them turned inside out. He turned to look at the small line that he'd tried to frantically save. All dead. He falls to his knees and weeps. He falls to his side and screams. Laura is also crying and snotty when she hears Sean on the comms and says, Sean? There's a slight pause. Laura? By the time she pulls up to Sean on her trike, Sean has buried the children he attempted to save. Laura shuts off the trike and says, You okay, kid? Sean sits in front of the graves. He doesn't move. He sits still for a minute, like Vivian the first chapter. Laura looks concerned, but then he speaks. They were human. I was saving them. And look at this horrible place. Even the poor bastards on the beach. What, the flesh can't stay on the bones 5 minutes? Sean's eyes close and more tears pour out. Laura is about to speak, but then there's another distant rumble. Sean perks up. What's that? Laura signals to Sean and starts up the trike. Hurry, get on. We've got to destroy the portal. Sean jumps onto the back of the trike and they peel out. Last time Laura drove by bodies, they weren't stinking, melting corpses, and she wasn't having to dodge the random bloody amorphous blobs either, so much tougher ride back. Another ship pierces the clouds and Sean says, Holy shit! He was in the maturation field when the first ship came. Laura yells over the revving motor. I don't have time to catch you up. Schwartz is dead. It's going to be up to us to close the portal. Outpost 2, return to Earth. Outpost 2, return to Earth. Outpost 1, prepare explosives around the portal, but do not set them off. The outposts return in the affirmative. Upon arriving, all but a few researchers have returned to Earth. The few remaining claim that Sean and Laura have no authority to close the portal, and that Earth needs this technology. Laura is about to argue with them about the bloodbath they've just witnessed, but Sean just mows them down with his laser machine gun. Sorry, they're fucked up. Go. Laura, a little shocked but not shaken, grabs the fully loaded mini-tac off her trike, activates the auto-spin, puts her helmet against Sean's for a second, and jumps into the pool. Sean waits 5 minutes, then sets off the explosives. Back on Earth, the alarms go off, the portal activates, and up pops Laura. A fellow research companion looks happy to see Laura and goes to help her out of the tub, but Laura nods no. The researcher looks confused, but then looks to her hands to see the mini-tac just below the waterline. They then look back to Laura and see that she is still nodding no. The researcher stops and thinks for 1 second, then screams, "Mini-tac! Everybody out!" The researcher runs out along with everyone else, hitting the alarms as they leave. Laura waits 5 minutes, then pulls the trigger. Remember what I said in the first report, that dreams are relative and subject to varying interpretations. I am just one guy, and while the outcome did seem potentially peaceful and serene in the first chapter, there was also a feeling of deceit and motive. If you imagine a beach full of comatose people and try to explain their reason for being there, only a couple of things come to mind, and an eternal nap may seem like a dream and an easy out to some. It's a nightmare for others. This is a worst-case scenario, an interpretation that assumes that the children playing were under an illusion and the napping adults were potentially slaves or food. I don't give any dates, and according to the lore and scenarios set by the original report, the sun is either extinguished or unable to get through Earth's atmosphere. The computer told Laura humanity had 900 years till it had consumed itself and wasn't worth farming. Sean especially thought that destroying the portal at both ends was not only necessary, but might have bought humanity some time. Again, this is a worst-case scenario. When I wrote the first chapter, I even presented some alternate viewpoints afterward on social media for the more faith-driven crowd. In fact, this may not even be the correct or full translation of the original dream. Those with belief systems next to their respiratory systems, people who need that thing to live, definitely won't see this ending's possibility. These are the types of things God would never allow in those types of minds. But in fact, both chapters of this story are filled with metaphors and allegories which match our present global social economic turmoil, and in chapter 3 I want to take this a step further into the real. At first we had a dream that seemed too magical and nonsensical, and with this chapter we peeled away some of the mysticism and tried to explain things, albeit in an imagined future setting, but in a way that doesn't require mysticism and magic. So we went from fantasy science fiction to just science fiction, and now we'll try to remove the science fiction from the dream and try to apply its visuals to a modern day crisis. Don't get mad or sad, because as soon as we figure out all this nonsense and eliminate the improbable, we'll likely have a full translation, or at least the most focused we could make the meaning as creative human beings. I never said if the villains were aliens, businessmen, or even fellow humans from other colonies. I just presented those options. I don't know, but without creativity, without the ability to envision alternate paths and possibilities, we are cattle, and probably shit in a global social economic crisis. Even I wasn't prepared for the outcome once I started down this possibilities path. Heaven or slaughterhouse. If you made it through, congratulations. As short and trippy as this is, it was way more uncomfortable to write than the first. That means that it only gets more uncomfortable from here on. But as long as I drop some zingers here and there, or have some explosions, you'll be alright.